Chapter 37. Dust Bowl Years, Early 1930s. Bell up. Slang for failure or going out of business. Farmers and merchants alike were going belly up in the 1930s. The Harnesses were living on the Bear Creek farm when the Dirty Thirties started in the summer of 1930. A 10-year drought hit the Midwest and southern Great Plains that caused massive dust storms and devastation in its path. Roughly 2.5 million people left the Dust Bowl states in the 30s, resulting in the largest migration in U.S. history. Oklahoma lost 440,000 people to migration, with many of them settling in the San Joaquin Valley of California. Many Arkies and Okies fled the catastrophe of biblical proportions to seek refuge from the plagues of devastation. I remember reading John Steinbeck's Grapes of Wrath in junior high school about this migration. None living today, except those who are very elderly, can imagine what it was like to live and survive the hardships of the Dust Bowl years. From 1930 through 1933, over 9,000 banks closed and $2.5 billion on deposit was gone. The rural economy returned to bartering in place of currency. In 1933, the per capita income in Arkansas was only $150. Many men, if they could find a job, were willing to work for 50 cents a day. Compared to before, many had worked for $1 a day in the timber for the cooperage in Leslie. Wages were falling, and banks were failing. Some were in panic, and poverty was spreading like the dust storms across the plains. Although there was a Great Depression going on, people needed something to take their mind off their struggles. Those who owned a radio could listen to free programs like Amos and Andy or a soap opera and the news. Some baseball games were broadcast, but many were blocked by owners until the World Series was broadcast in 1935. It would not be until 1939 that all games were aired. Big bands brought swing music, and people gathered to have dances with music from the radio. Even though money was tight, people continued to go to movies. Prohibition had made the manufacturing and sale of alcohol illegal, but anyone who wanted a drink had options if they had money. Riley Harness moved his family from Atlas or IMO, welcome home, back to Bear Creek by the time of the 1930 census. The census also showed that Grandma Jenny Harness, age 95, was living with Mart Harness, age 62, and his daughter, Nora Bell Harness, age 42. All three of them were living together in the lower house. Riley began to build a new house nearby with the help of a carpentry man who was a Godfrey. He moved his extended family of wife, children, parents, and grandma into the bigger house. It was located up the hill and to the south of the lower house, a couple 100 yards away. Katie Elizabeth Harness, the wife of Billy, began to experience the loss of her mind at that time. Perry Harness remembered his mother Melinda taking care of her as Katie's health declined. She got to a place where she was bedfast and required care for all her needs. She met her death on July 26, 1934, at the age of 70. Katie Harness died and was buried next to her daughter Martha and her unborn infant in the Bear Creek Cemetery. Katie's family, Flats, had immigrated to America 4 generations before from Switzerland, and she was born in Texas. Her family was from around Point Peter, Snowball area, when Billy married her. Her sister, Annis Cordelia Flatt, married John Bohannon. But he died in 1909, and she remarried William Castleberry. In 1921, there is a Harness-Bohannon connection through the Flatt sisters' marriages. A conflict happened during this era between John Bohannon and Billy Harness, whose farms joined. The schoolhouse was near the property line and was called the Bohannon School. Detailed maps of today still have the name Bohannon as the name of the community. The conflict came when John Bohannon told Billy Harness that he was going to abandon the 40 acres, which he had under a 7-year homestead agreement. This made the property available to any person who wanted to then take it over. When Billy had opportunity, he went to the land office in Harrison, which was an overnight trip by train. Upon arrival, Billy found out John had proved up on the land, and it was not available. When Billy returned home, he confronted John about the matter and how much trouble he had created for him to no avail. John Bohannon told him that he had discovered coal on the property, and that was why he had reneged on letting the property go back with plans to sell the property. Looking for proof, the two went to a bluff near Bear Creek, and John showed him some coal in a crack of the rock. Billy looked at the small amount of coal that had been placed there in the crack and found a small piece of burlap string from the sack used to carry the coal. Billy pulled the string out and offered to give it to John. After an exchange of words, Billy hit John so hard with his fist that John went backward and fell into Bear Creek. Billy picked up John's axe he had brought to cut brush and threw it into the creek with John. Bohannon waded out of the cold water on the other side of the creek, and the two families were thereafter crossed and avoided each other. I don't know if there is a Bohannon version of the story, but in another generation of Harnesses, Earl Harness mended some of the rift that had begun that day by a string, a fist, and cold water. It was not the proper way to confront a falsehood, but it was some of the old spirit that had developed in the Civil War times between neighbors. It was a generational sin that still lingered and had to die with those who had fought their brother and spilled blood. In years to come, Earl would lead some of the Bohannons into Bear Creek, this time to baptize them. Sometimes waters can also be healing. Billy had thrown the axe, and Earl had buried the axe. Reflection. Riley Harness had lived free from the dangers of war, but then he had a challenge that would be threatening to his family: poverty and starvation. He could work hard, but he couldn't make the heavens send down rain. Drought and heat were his concerns and not Wall Street. It was a long season of survival and sharing needs, and the old hen was helpless to tend to her chicks, but prayers were increasing, and Billy's heart would mellow with time. A man's understanding makes him slow to anger. It is to his honor to forgive and forget a wrong done to him. Proverbs 19:11.